What have we done? And do you remember all the way back in episode 16 when I promised this?
Is there a way we can take this up a notch and make it even better? Even more fun, even more entertaining, even more interactive? I say yes. Let me know in the comments below if you guys would like to do an interactive challenge with me. And when we get to 100,000 subscribers, as a celebration, we will do a 1 hour long episode.
Well, it's time. And I'll have to think of a new one for when we get to 1 million subscribers. Are you ready? Here we go. We went all the way to New York City, got on a plane so that we could all investigate New York City. We are going to be looking into the St. Patrick's Cathedral, the Empire State Building, as well as a lot of other things, and attempting to expose the truth about all of these buildings, showing that they were most likely built by a much more advanced, previous civilization that was here all over the world. We're also going to be looking into the New York Life Insurance Company building, which is located on 51 Madison Avenue, Manhattan, New York. Built in the Gothic Revival style, a massive 615-foot tall tower that we are being told was constructed in a single year, from 1927 to 1928, 1 year, and replaced the original Madison Square Garden. Where constructing massive towers in a single year is something that New York City seems to get away with a lot. When they tell us they did the exact same thing over at the Empire State Building. And we went to the top of this thing, which was very cool to see the whole city. And also gives you a great understanding just how hard this would be to build, especially in the amount of time that they tell us, and especially in the years that they tell us. But before we go into that, and since we are here in New York, where we all know about the Statue of Liberty, and we know that it stands on top of, in my opinion, an old world star fort, where I think this is the perfect time to bring up something that I've seen in the comments section so many times, possibly more than anything else. And if you hear me blanking out certain words throughout this episode, I think at this point we can all understand why. Where we have Satan's little season. And we all know I am not somebody that brings religion into my research very often. And I'm not telling anybody what to think. I never will. I'm simply sharing my research and any information that I find valuable, exactly as I have since day one of this channel. But the fact that I'm bringing this up, this could be massive. So check this out. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, which we have seen before in episode 75, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. We have a painting of Lucifer in 1797, and then compared to the Statue of Liberty, where you can close your eyes and see that they look identical. And we just read that Satan was chained in a bottomless pit for 1,000 years. This is the story. Well, when you look at the Statue of Liberty, which was possibly created, and in my opinion, completed as a celebration of this little season's beginning, where it of course has that broken chain, where we're just getting started. All of this dedicated to 1776, the exact year that we are talking about here, where all of these inventions all started back up. Now, this statue was completed in 1886 with its cornerstone holding some logos on it that you can see right here, with two guys being the architects, where we have Frederick joining this group's lodge in 1875 and Richard H., the other architect. Same thing. Is this statue a celebration for Satan's return? A celebration for him fulfilling his 1,000 years, chained in the pit, finally getting out in 1776, and deceiving us ever since? Is this the reason that these palaces all over the world look so out of place? And now we get these horrible, basic, demoralizing boxes to look at. Now we can all ask questions, since we basically know that the mainstream history that we've all been told is filled with a ton of lies, where we get clues and destruction of our past right after this date. of 1776. We get all of the Great Fires, where the mainstream narrative gives us basically 0 lives taken, yet complete and total destruction of all of these cities. Is this not something that the one that just broke out of the pit would do? That he should deceive the nations no more until the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. After he should be loosed a little season, catacombs, great fires, complete chaos, wars, total manipulation, worldwide confusion for decades, the food that we're fed, the water, inverting everything, calling it Lady Liberty when it's really a man, power, control, separating families, creating 2 asylums, an orphan asylum for the kids and an insane asylum for the adults, resetting everything, and then sending us back to the horse and wagon era, entrapping us on this false map. All technology being reset, traffic, and I'm not talking about the cars, financial difficulties for 99%, holding interest on currency or usury, everything that a morally good individual would never do to a population. And we all know at this point that these groups all follow this individual that's possibly in its little season, where if you've done this research for a long time, you know that they are very spiritual. And if that is true, that their side is real, then who's to say that the other side isn't real as well? When Lucifer, or the Lightbringer in Latin, often personified as a male figure bearing a torch. And who else is holding a torch? Satan's little season. New York City, very interesting place, where they supposedly threw this massive building together in a single year, the Empire State Building. From 1930 to 1931, a 102-story high, 1,250 foot tall skyscraper that was the tallest building in the world until 1970. 12 months or less. We are told this was done. Remember, they have to work through winters. And this story gets extremely interesting and begins to show us how they do this and how these buildings are quickly thrown into the narrative where people didn't even have a chance to verify what was even really going on in the early 1900s, where they're telling us that the Waldorf Astoria was constructed in 1893, and then they demolish it in 1929, making way for the construction of the Empire State Building. So immediately, alarms should be going off in all of our minds. This narrative has just started, and we have already found something massive, where they were knocking down Renaissance Revival style hotels after just 36 years. Now, a side note, I just want to add in my personal opinion at this point, where you can believe whatever you like, but I believe that these buildings, as we've seen in Chicago, were actually constructed somewhere else in New York City, and they were demolished in 1929, but not to be replaced by the Empire State Building. I believe that the Empire State Building was always here, and these construction photos are ridiculous, where they are clearly edited, and they even admit that some of these photos were basically to trick the public when they say that this famous photo of the guys sitting on the beam was arranged as a publicity stunt, all a part of a campaign promoting the skyscraper. Now, this is for the Rockefeller Center, but only 1 year after the Empire State Building. So they were in the business of doctoring photos during this time period, manipulating the public. So this is not a shocking accusation at this point, since we have seen this so many times, especially when the identity of the actual photographer remains unknown and will forever be a mystery, where it goes on to say, they don't even know who the people were in the shot. Photo manipulation has been going on much longer than we are told. And we know this now, and we have shown this. So we can't just simply look at a construction photo where the building is basically done anyway and say that that is proof when we know that isn't proof. The Great Depression began in 1929, where people were in shock. They were not focused on which building was being constructed. They were not focused on how many years it took to build the building. They didn't have the internet to quickly look this stuff up. So in 1929, the exact year that the Great Depression starts. They supposedly knock this old world hotel down the exact same year, where there are so many photos of the inside of this palace. I have to take a second and show them. I can't logically put it together in my mind that something like this would be knocked down after just 36 years. If you want to know my opinion, just looking at these photos, matching the dates up with the Great Depression, and then giving us the narrative that the tallest building in the world just shows up after a year with fake propaganda to convince the world, it just couldn't be more of a lie in my opinion. So they knocked this thing down, where we can come back to this hotel one day. There is so much in this narrative that I could do an entire episode on this one, but I want to go to the Empire State Building's website, giving us this timeline where they knocked down this hotel, and from 1929 they are able to destroy a building, clean the whole thing up, get the designs ready for the tallest building in the world, get all of the materials together, all during the Great Depression, where inside the building they are telling us that the steel often arrived still warm from Pittsburgh, which is like 400 miles away. And remember, they weren't driving Lamborghinis. By the 1930s, there were long-haul trucks with a top speed of 25 miles an hour. So, this was a lot longer than 6 hours. And who knows what the highways were like. We are shown a bunch of dirt roads in the cities at this speed of 25 miles per hour on a highway that isn't bumpy and has hills. So doing 25 miles an hour the entire way. No bathroom breaks, no snacks, no stops. While according to physics forums, generally, it can take anywhere from a few minutes to several hours for a steel block to cool down. So it's not gonna take 15 hours when they just state it could cool down in a few minutes. This steel ridiculous story of it still being hot is ridiculous. I feel like that story should be removed from the inside of the Empire State Building at this point. And it has just been proven to be a lie, in my opinion. According to what we've just shown, they have a lie on the wall. What else can we find? Remember, they have to get all the men. They need to get everything ready. And then, after all that's done, knock out the tallest building in the world. All completed in 1931. When they start putting this building in the movies, like King Kong, and showing the world that this is the brand new building, where we all know how the industry works at this point. We all know how it goes. We know that it promotes the narrative that it wants to, and it promotes the people that are in the group, and that's fine. They can do that. But it is our job to understand what is going on, and what has been going on for a very long time. Where it says, it is the first of many iconic roles the building will play on the silver screen, and among its most important pop culture moments, in my opinion. This is an old world building that they are just throwing right into our timeline, right during the Great Depression, and pretending like it was never there before. This is a magic trick, and I bet you they were laughing the entire time, when nobody even realized it, since they did it when the population was most vulnerable financially. Now for the fun, are you ready? We are told something massive, something that will give this all away. Here we go. The firm was founded in 1920, a partnership of Richmond S. and William L. Richard was the administrator. Remember, the plans had to be perfect. He had to get the entire project of the tallest building in the world, get it all together in a single year, and completed, where it states that Richard's planning skills facilitated the completion of the construction in a year. Richard's planning skills were recognized. A man that had the same name as his dad, a teacher for 4 years, and a member of the Sphinx Society, where his legacy states that he was also the lead architect for the landmark 1937 Williamsburg houses, housing development. So are you ready to see what these houses look like? The clear giveaway. A master that can knock out a masterpiece during the Great Depression, the tallest building in the world, and then take double the time to build some housing units. Mr. Richard, I believe you are being exposed. I believe this shows that the individual that supposedly led the construction of the Empire State Building, they themselves couldn't replicate it in just a small complex, let alone a massive tower. They never did it again. In my opinion, proving that this building was not constructed when we are told it was. Welcome to episode 77 of My Lunch Break. I hope you're all having a great day. And if you're new, welcome. And I want to thank all of our sponsors over on Patreon. Thank you to FlatEarthDave.com. You can check out his app. I'll put the link in the description, and you can use my referral code, MLB. He also has My Lunch Break on the homeschool section of the app, which is really cool. Thank you to Rebecca Kay, Don Gaston, Christopher Arietta, The Lady Lacey Show, David and Sherry Ferguson, Edwin Johnson, Chuck Templeton, Joy Lee, PNR, Stephanie Nolan, The Burlesons, Suez KC, Dan Woodle, Dale, DJ Clicktrack, Edward and Brianna, Jacob Law, Jim Ribley and Christine Duggan, Kyle Glascock, Tim Rack, PKTFnews.org, Regna Saturna, Dendries NL, Juana Mesher, Sirius Feline, G Power, Natalie Shippenoff, Amberson EMC, HK Sue, Isaac Wright, Melissa Edgar, Biggles, Clayton Lamar, Ultimus Maximus, Noble Task Homestead, John Adams, Easy and Whitney, Roberts O'Zolins, The Crypto Schizo, Rick Tapkey, Coach C, Jesse DeLeon, Blake, Billy Prater, Magnus, Paraplegic Coffee, The Phoenix Art, Jetski Chuck, The Arnolds, 3D6.Space, Attila Power, VKH Bonner, Rod James, Bell's Clarions for God, Forbidden Gecko Love, Justin Grobner Grubb, Leah Strong, Peter Batani, Dakota Dunn, Eric Martinez, Ivan Apoctoli, Jim Bro, Edwin Rice, Helmut, Charles Kruger, Glenn Gunderson, Pacific Crafted, HaggardT-shirts.com, Meta, Jason Hochberg, Marie C, ValleyMedicinals.com, Old World Exploration, Kyle Logan, Bobo, WakeandBakeClothing.com, David and Irene, Michael Dingyu, Michelle Wilson, Patriot Armory, Tom O'Hara, Wayne T, Michael D. Connor, Hen Yardies, William Royal, C3SCOB, Ancient Tallow, Jeffrey Temple, Lil Miss, Lisa Boutwell, Luis Capice, SoniaDane.com, Thad Luop, James Alt, Bucksui, Code Dren, Big Pasty, Jason Prest, Suki Warrior, We the People, Dan McGee, Vince Moreno, Roz Matthews, Shiba Shaba in the Darkness. You guys are all awesome and helping this channel out a lot. Really quick, just want to show you all. Modern Day Donkeys Incorporated. Lots of distractions, we are told. Much less effort. Lots of evolving and lots of advancing. No. Look at those wheels high in the air. It's so cool that we can use that cage on the ground and up in the air. It's so amazing. 2024 is just incredible. And throughout New York City, we can see the previous civilization's buildings, hiding behind our ridiculous, pathetic scaffolding. This needs to be addressed. We have these $5 plastic poles next to this detailed stone building, and it's like this throughout the whole city. A clear shot, clear proof that we are going backwards. There's no advancing going on. There is zero evolving. As I've said before, we are as advanced as we're allowed to be. The roof of these things look like something you'd just go put on the top of your hut after you've crashed on a deserted island and needed to use the washed up garbage that you found coming up onto the beach. Can you believe this is our civilization's choice? New York City, get it together. This is horrible. Then you have modern construction, the basic box style, which hurts your eyes just looking at it. And then we have the Hearst Tower, where you have this castle-type building, and they've attached this modern glass, weird-looking building right on top of it. A very clear contrast between our civilization and the previous civilization. Some triangles and some glass versus very detailed stonework. One that will last a few decades. and one that will last centuries, if not longer. Now, I was going to put this episode out right as we hit 100,000 subscribers, but it ended up taking me a lot longer to complete than I originally expected. I also wanted to make sure that it was an awesome episode for everyone. So we had two options. It was either we took a few weeks off from having an episode, which is not an option. So really we only had one, because I look forward to every Saturday way too much and hearing all of your comments and continuing to open the door for more and more people to find this research. So that option was 100% off the table. The other option was to just push this episode back a few weeks. I figured the majority of you would agree. So here we are. It's time to go even deeper into this when we take a look into the St. Patrick's Cathedral, where they tell us that Archbishop Hughes laid the cornerstone in front of 100,000 subscribers. Spectators. Not 99,000, not 101. 100,000 on the dot, near the intersection of 5th Avenue and 50th Street. Though the precise location will forever be a mystery and remains unclear. So let me get this straight. 100,000 people were there, yet nobody can remember where this was. Nobody documented it. Not a single person of the 100,000 remember where the cornerstone was. Nobody knows for the rest of time. This is ridiculous and a total lie in my opinion, where I believe that the cornerstone on most of these buildings holds valuable items from the previous civilization, where we have seen this a few times before, but I believe they know this, and this is why they don't want to let us know the true location of the cornerstone. They go on to tell us more nonsense, where this cathedral was mostly funded from the parishioners of the churches, who were mainly poor Irish immigrants. So poor Irish immigrants were funding this palace. Please tell me in the comments below, what do you think of that? Where I think these are the perfect people to fund massive projects. The poor people. Yes, this is the mainstream narrative for you. That was almost as good as the master prisoner construction teams that we've seen all over the world, where they have zero training, but just knocking out star forts in a year. No problem at all. So at this point, we know that something is definitely off with this cathedral, especially when they tell us that they held a design competition for the chapel, where it's another AI repeating narrative that we have seen over and over. They just had so many architects in the 1800s, just waiting around, all in every city, and they were all perfect, never a mistake. And they were fully trained to knock out palaces. They had so many of them that they were just forced to hold competitions. So many master architects back then. No, with a nice completion. Construction photo. Yeah, that thing is done. Where they just destroy this thing over and over. Restore and upgrade. We went there, and this was no project funded by the poor Irish people, let me tell you. Nothing against poor Irish people, of course. They are incredible people. But it just seems like it would require a budget that even the Irish middle class would struggle to afford. While walking up to this palace, we noticed the massive doors. Again, in my opinion, constructed for people much bigger than us. Not only do you feel a presence inside this palace from just looking at the detailed architecture, but we have shown in episode 72 that catacombs are under a lot of these massive churches all around the world. And we also know the old St. Patrick's Cathedral holds catacombs. We were told that, and we were told that this one does not. But we all know this may be a lie. We have a few more videos here that I want you all to see of this place. It was possibly the coolest old world building that I'd ever personally been inside of to this point, which was right up there with the Basilica of St. Louis. Well, and then they just built a new church a few years ago over by me, but I'd have to say the St. Patrick's Cathedral just barely beats it. I did have to sleep on that decision. Notice, they both have the window in the front. Pretty amazing. Just nothing like our construction. Took them a whole 10 years. It was a great attempt by our civilization. I would love to know who the competition winner was. of the 2020s palace. Look at the columns. They're just jaw-dropping. When I saw the Greenwich Savings Bank building, I knew that this was going to be a fun episode. New York City still has so many incredible old world buildings. It's really fun to walk around and just look at them all, in between all of our modern construction. They have them on nearly every single corner. This one being one of them. Located at 1352 to 1362 Broadway, Midtown Manhattan, where it was constructed from 1922 to 1924. Supposedly 2 years. During the exact same time period that they slipped the Empire State Building into our narrative. And we have shown how easily they change history, even up to this day, where I showed you all in episode 74 that 4 days after episode 59 came out, they altered the Baltimore Great Fire narrative. So if they could do it today in 2024, without anybody noticing, even though thousands of us are talking about it and watching, which they were probably not doing in the 1920s. So even with us watching, they're still able to switch it up. So we know here that 100 years ago, changing narratives was a simple task. When we are, of course, told that there was a previous bank, which we've seen so many times, where it moved, not just once in 1839, just 6 years after being found, but it moved again supposedly in 1846, and again in 1854, and then again in 1892, and again in the 1920s. So we have 6 different buildings attached to this one building's narrative. This is a clear pattern that we have seen, where this is all misdirection and confusion in order to explain away this palace of a building that was constructed by the previous civilization. And we all know this now, where they of course hire Mark and his son to get the job done. A clear pattern that is given to these buildings' narratives all over the world. The same source creating these stories over and over. And when you know what to look for, like we do here, it becomes so obvious. So as I was walking around New York City, I noticed that the subway was under the sidewalk, obviously. And we know that these buildings are most likely bigger than we can see. And the street level is most likely not the foundation of New York City. And this is when I found all of these other places in New York City while walking around. The sidewalk that we are walking on is not what you think it is. It is the ceiling to the underworld, where you can clearly see that this is the case, that the true foundation of the old world is below our feet. New York City right now, today, has so much more going on under the street, and has so much more than we can all physically see. You can even see the lights coming up from underneath the city, where we can go over to the New York Public Library, a palace library, in the middle of all of this, where you no longer have to travel to Italy to see this kind of architecture. Thank you to Donkeys Incorporated. We have it here in the USA as well, where they knocked this thing out in less than a year, telling us that on May 23rd, 1895, Bigelow agreed to create the New York Public Library. The plan was hailed as an example of private philanthropy for the public good, of course. Very nice. Well, May 23rd, they began. And December 11th, a great Christmas present for New York. The building names its first director, and this thing is done. Where they tell us on their website that they, of course, held another design competition for this building as well. This is amazing. Palace after palace, and every winner of the 1800s was perfect. There was never a mistake. There was never a bad construction team back in the day. They were all reliable. Every single one that won their competition all over the world, you could count on. And in a photo from over 120 years ago, this does not look like a brand new building. It looks like it's been there for a very long time, and just had the New York Public Library engraved into the top and stuck some flags out front as a symbol for their takeover. So check out the inside of this place. I wasn't able to go all the way inside, but I was able to see the lobby. Massive doorways, 30-foot high arches, stairways on both sides, not a single sheet of drywall in sight. This was just your average 1800s palace. I would love to have a library card to this place, where I'm guessing this was not originally constructed to be your local library. And I'm not sure if I should talk about this next place, and we all know why at this point. Episode 59 had some issues with it. So I'll try to do this, but in a way where you might have to comment below and ask someone what I meant. But hopefully you can all understand what I'm trying to say. Here we go. Do we all know this location? Around 23 years ago, it was on the news, and something massive happened here. And we have talked about the catacombs, where they charge an entry fee to nearly every single one, to see what they have done to the people, putting them into geometric patterns. People that were taking up too much space, supposedly. Well, we have the same sort of weird thing going on here. Charging us money to go and see this memorial that they've put together, supposedly for the victims, but they collect money for you to go inside. It's a very strange thing to profit off of, in my opinion. And putting one of these at the front gate. And is this not just rubbing it all right in our faces? All right, I'm moving on. Maybe I'll go live on Rumble one day. So make sure you're following me over there. We might have to talk to them soon about setting that up. For now, let's go to the Grand Central Terminal, where they tell us that this was born in 1913, where they just skip over the whole construction part of things on their website. They just start the story off by saying, it's here for us all to see. So let's see why they did this. They don't seem to want to share those details, where it starts off by saying, the original Grand Central Depot is constructed in 2 years, 24 years before the power tool. Here it is, right here on their site. I'll zoom in so you can all get a better look. Can you believe that they tell us 2 years to construct this, when it takes 2 years to build a strip mall in 2010? This is ridiculous, especially when they tell us that they need to redesign it 27 years later, because this one just wasn't cutting it anymore. It's time for an upgrade. Reopens, and we get a crash 2 years later, of course, where they invite architecture firms to compete in yet another design competition. This is incredible. This is in 1903, and the same year, less than 6 months later, in June, construction begins. And then in 1910, they demolish the old Grand Central Station, where in my opinion, there were multiple stations, and they're both old. This one that's here today is also old. It's not new. So they knocked the other one down, and 3 years later, 1913, Grand Central Terminal opens up, supposedly. This is incredible. I believe it was here all along, with an interesting bullet point here, down at the bottom. Possibly an exposure of what has been there all along. When in 1994 to 1999, Grand Central North, a series of tunnels between the terminal and streets to its north, is exposed to the world. Constructed. When during the same years, the terminal was destroyed. Renovated close to, not fully, but close to its original appearance. Of course it was. Cleaning the celestial ceilings. After what we've seen, I'm guessing that they removed something from the ceiling. Let me know what you think about that. Cleaning the ceilings. With more extensive renovation in 1999. So we went inside and checked it out. And it is impressive, of course. The whole thing, including the outside, was just over the top. Massive ceilings and detailed architecture, which is exactly how we do things today. No. And here's what is left of the ceiling's artwork. And you can also see the detail above every single window. Pretty impressive. And just like this drawing of the past, you can see the tech on top of these buildings, where it was still on the buildings around New York City, just like this one. Then I thought for a second that I was in Budapest, when I saw the Peninsula, New York. And before we go to Budapest, New York City, let's all take a minute and thank all of our badge members, all of our Patreons, and every single subscriber, and everybody who likes the videos. You are all the reason that this channel is growing and reaching more and more people every single week. We hit 100,000 subscribers on April 17th, 2024, which was incredible. I wish I could share this play button with all of you. I am very thankful for all of your support. And I'm honestly really glad that you are all enjoying the episodes. There are so many cool, exciting things that I have planned for this channel. The more that we grow, the more that we can expose, and the more entertaining these episodes can get. This channel is called My Lunch Break, but at this point, I feel like it's way more than just mine. But obviously, we're not switching any names now. But I wanted to make sure I stopped and took the time to thank you all and let you all know that we're just getting started. The Peninsula, New York, a historic luxury hotel located at the corner of 5th Avenue and 55th Street. They tell us that this was constructed in just 1 year. Can you believe this? Over and over, they tell us 1 or 2 years to construct palaces built with limestone and granite. Italian Renaissance Revival style palaces. 12 months, no problem at all 120 years ago. Where we get the repeating names. The Byers, just great pals. Henry Goodwin and Henry Hoyt. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite example is that we've exposed so far of the repeating names. I'm gonna try to tally up all your comments and use that example for the one in the future. The building would be designed by Hiss and Weeks, constructed by the General Building and Construction Company. What a name. We just build general buildings, just average general buildings in a year. Oh, and we forgot to mention, they're in the Italian Renaissance Revival style. So you can search all you want for the General Building and Construction Company. You will never find it with a name like that. Just the way they like it. The General Building Company. Incredible. Where they got to it, of course, in the 1980s. This was originally named the Gotham when they opened it back up in 1905. Built in 1 year. Can you believe this? I honestly can't believe that this was ever overlooked. Especially when they tell us to build the whole thing only took a year. And then the renovation process takes 6 years. After 80 years of evolving and advancing, and it takes 6 times the amount of time to just renovate it. This is not a trustworthy narrative at all, in my opinion. Something massive is off. The renovation should not take 6 times the amount of time 80 years later on a building that was supposedly easily thrown together in a year from start to finish. I believe that this is a clear-cut lie and has been fully exposed to the world. Now we have some really cool footage on top of the Empire State Building of the entire city of New York, where I need to make sure we put this in the episode so we can all look back on it. Where it's not every day for most of us that we get to see the skyline like this. So figured you'd all want to see it. And now that you've seen it, let's move on to the Tiffany & Company building, where one of the nation's leading jewelry makers, of course, get an old world building, moving multiple times yet again, before finally settling on this palace, where Charles Tiffany, where he was going to relocate again, but he died that year, and Charles Cook took over, where he hired McKim, Mead & White, where he told them to build me a palace. Of course he did. Where another repeating name, Charles Tiffany, the owner, And now the contractor is also named Charles, where the site was being excavated and the foundation walls collapsed. So 1904 comes around and the cornerstone is supposedly laid. 1905 hits, and what do you know? The Tiffany building opens up. 1 year, yet again. We have repeating names and 1 year to finish the entire building, where I'm just thankful that they did not have a fire story this time. Wait, what is this? They have a basement, and this basement has a vault that explosives and drills could not penetrate the vault. When the vault experienced a minor fire in 1914, you gotta be kidding me. So we do get the fire nod. I thought we made it through without that nod, but no. And of course, they go on to give us this weird story where there is supposedly a fire inside the vault somehow, where it must have been the neighborhood ghost or a planned fire, because where the guards knew that there was a fire inside the vault. Remember, it's inside the vault, so they must have shut the doors afterwards. Yet these guys refused to let the New York City Fire Department firefighters inside. Does this sound off to you? Could you imagine? You have a vault in your house and it's locked, and now out of nowhere, there is a fire inside of this vault in your house, somehow. And we know there's a fire in there, somehow. And the firefighters want to go in and put that fire out, but you're just not letting them in there. Does this sound sketchy or what? Where the vault was accessed by a marble hallway. Don't forget that all of this was built in 1 year, supposedly, with decorative gates at one end. There was also a safekeeping department with Gustaving tiled ceilings and marble walls. This is very standard work back in the day. Just telling people to go build them a palace, and it would be done. No problem at all. And it would be there forever, looking better than anything we ever construct today. And definitely everything that we build today in a year. This is a very believable and acceptable story. No, where the first story of this building originally contained 10 tons of bronze fixtures, which was of course removed from the store in the 1952 renovation. And then we have this, the St. Thomas Church, located at 53rd Street and 5th Avenue, Manhattan, New York, where they tell us that in 1823, some people decided it was time for a new church, with the cornerstone being laid in July of 1824, where the first church opened up in 1826. 2 years, wrapped it right up, while taking their donkeys for a walk. Again, multiple churches to explain this one away, designed in the Gothic Revival style, where they had to remodel the church just 18 years after getting it done. In 1844, that church just wasn't cutting it to accommodate a growing congregation. And this is when the first St. Thomas Church was destroyed by a fire on March 2nd, 1851. And the congregation built a brand new church on the same location, which we've seen so many times. And this one took them less than a year. The same site, where they just cleaned up the old one that burned down in 1851. And then they completed the new one in 1852. They're telling us that this took 1 year. Does anyone still trust these stories at this point? Please let me know in the comments. I would love to know. And if you're still trusting the mainstream, I'm gonna end that right now. When a third church was built from 1865 to 1870, supposedly, at the corner of 53rd Street and 5th Avenue, where Richard and his son, is this a nod to Mason? Where they designed the place, and the cornerstone was actually laid in 1868. And 2 years later, the thing was done. So not 5 years, it was 2 years. And the third building, this structure, was destroyed by a fire in 1905. So I'm gonna ask again, how many of you are still on the fence? The one that is there today is the fourth church, which is insane at this point. And a clear repeating narrative all over the world. Multiple buildings to explain the one that looks like a palace. So the fourth church, this incredible structure, was supposedly built in just 2 years, from 1911 to 1913, where the design by Cram and Goodhue won the architectural competition to build the St. Thomas Church. This is honestly just incredible. The repetition is just so clear at this point, where if you've watched all of the episodes up to this point, I would have to say there is a 0% chance that you're still on the fence about all of this, and that you fully understand that what we have been told is a bunch of nonsense, that this is not the true story. There is a 0% chance in my mind that all of this could accidentally really happen. In every single one of these palace-like structures all over the world, the odds of them having the same story for every single old world-looking building, it has to be 0%. And you don't need a math degree to understand that. You can see with your eyes that this is not something that was built in 2 years with no power tools and had 5 fires. The sidewalk in my neighborhood took 3 years to put together. There is no way that these buildings were getting knocked out over and over in 24 months or less. And these depictions of everyone riding around on horses, and then you have this palace with garbage houses in between, is complete nonsense. These depictions are not factual evidence of the past. These are just paintings. And we all need to understand this now. And it even tells you this is a painting. Where I've had some people on X tell me that paintings are true depictions of the past, that they are construction proofs. So I just need to make sure that everybody understands and is on the same page. That I can go and paint this tonight and put a spaceship in the background. This doesn't mean that there was actually a spaceship there. It's just a painting. Even photographs are manipulated, where we have shown this as well, where Photoshop is not a brand new tool. So hopefully for the future, we can all see that paintings would not hold up in court as factual documents. I want to go back to the Hearst Tower for 2 reasons. I was waiting to see if anyone would mention it in the comments about why these suns keep getting thrown into so many old world buildings narratives, and who these suns are, or who they may actually have been, or who they are referencing to, where we have the building's designers named Joseph Urban and George B. Post and Sons, where I don't think these are actually George B. Post's sons, where we have interesting nods within George Post's bio, preceded by Daniel Burnham, where we know about the fires, and his wife's last name was Stone, another old world nod. And we have seen the sons thrown in at the end of so many of these projects' narratives. Well, who else is Sons? The May Sons. Are the Sons actually the nod to that group? Well, we're allowed to ask questions. We have found so many repeating names, this being just one of them. Over and over, we find clues as to why these narratives could not possibly be factual information. The amount of repetition would be impossible in stories that are true. Where we can go back to George B. Post's narrative, where he was under General Burnside and then preceded by Burnham. We have repeating fire names within the same guy's narrative. And I'm not done. Are you still on the fence? Let's go to his public buildings section, where in 1893, Post was supposedly named to the architectural staff of the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, Illinois, by yet another Burnham and Root. So this was the first reason for revisiting this building. The second reason is its timeline, its construction in particular, where we all know that they could just build the Empire State Building in a year, supposedly, and all during the Great Depression. So this one that was constructed in 2006 should have been done in like 5 months. We are told that the original building, the stone building at the base, the one that they tell us was built as the base for a future tower, no, had construction begin in June 1927 and completed by January 1928. So we're being told that this took them like 6 or 7 months to get the whole thing done. Can you believe this? Now let's evolve and advance and become the most incredible society to ever live, so we are told. Let's advance our tools from 1928 to the year 2001, when they announced that Norman Foster would design a tower addition, with them giving us actual documented accounts, saying that they had to review the plans, also saying that they decided to restrict visitor access and relocate the tower's core. Destruction of the past? You tell me. So in April 2003, work began. So they had to complete this one in like 5 months or less. It's just steel and glass, basically. And we've evolved in advance for like 80 years. We have incredible tools and incredible training processes now. The highest levels of architecture school ever to exist. We have shipping companies that will get the materials there on time. We fully understand the construction process by now, especially when they did from June 1927 to January 1928. A stone structure that is perfectly detailed. We should be able to get this completed very fast at this point, and extremely efficient. When we are told it began in 2003, April, where it was officially completed in 2006, taking 3 years for our current civilization, showing that we can't even build a glass and steel structure as efficient as the past could build a stone detailed palace, where we all know that their building is going to last lifetimes, and ours will last a few decades. Incredibly detailed stonework, done in less than a year, a few months, just incredible. The facts are right in front of our faces, all over the world, time and time again, with the Times writing, past and present, don't fit seamlessly together here. They collide with ferocious energy, calling the Hearst Tower's design deeply comforting, when I feel the complete opposite about it. It is our ugly construction on top of the old world's incredible work. And I've said that there is so much more on the way for this channel. And I mean it, including much more information on what is below our feet. We are given a public map, a map of the New York City subway and path system, where we know that this is just a small portion of the systems below the ground. For years of my personal life, I was naive and thought that most of what was here was what we could see. I thought that tunnel systems and underground bases were a relatively new concept. I thought that it was mostly done for government purposes. I did not realize that these tunnel systems, connecting buildings throughout the world, underground pathways, underground buildings, rooms, hallways, all of this were here and predate things that we have been told, predating the horse and wagon community, exactly like we saw in episode 74, when the Germans called Stalingrad hell on earth, and the tunnels had the width of 2 horse-drawn carts, and these tunnels were found. The older the tunnels, the better they were made. So do we all understand what is still to come from this channel? Did we all see that the catacombs, a massive collection of bones in geometric patterns below massive churches all around the world in episode 72, where we know that there is an ability of certain materials, including bone, to generate an electrical charge? Do you feel something when you walk inside one of these palaces? Do you physically feel it without understanding what that feeling really is? Do you have a clearer idea that you may be feeling the electrical charge below your feet? A place that you are drawn to for reasons that you never knew before. Are we drawn to these locations for those that know that these things are still operational today? A presence that was most likely found below the floor in 1972 and excavated, exactly like we have shown in episode 68 at the Tron Kirk in Scotland. Like I've said, we are just getting started with this channel, taking our knowledge much further than before. And we all know what knowledge brings. Power. We unlock our minds. We free ourselves to become stronger mentally and physically. Being able to think with an open mind is one of the greatest gifts that we can be given. Being able to question things and think logically is the only way to find the truth. Now, do we all remember when I said that I'd be waiting to talk about Flushing High School. A high school that looks like a massive castle. A high school that has a narrative that I'm going to expose right now. The oldest high school in all of New York. Well, today is the day when they tell us that Flushing High School was originally located somewhere else, on the northeast corner of Union Street and Sanford Avenue. Just having multiple buildings pinned to the narrative yet again, telling us that an entire high school thrown together in just 3 years, from 1912 to 1915, where they tell us that in 1875, the first Flushing High School opened up. A large 4 to 5 story building served as the town's high school. A large 4 to 5 story building where the first year that Flushing High School operated, there was only 7 students. Is this not 100% confirmation that these buildings were not constructed for our civilization? A massive 4 to 5 story building that our civilization only needed 1 room for 7 students. How much clearer could this get? Did we just find something massive or what? And they don't tell us anything about the first Flushing High School's construction, just stating that it opened up in 1875. Who built that one? How long did construction take? Where did the materials come from? Who was the architect? Where the mainstream completely ignores the most important details every single time. And I know we are 100% correct, that these buildings were built by the previous civilization, and we have found and unlocked the keys to their narrative. We have found massive clues to the game, and I'm going to show you this yet again. Are you ready? When a fire on the top floor of the 1875 Old World Flushing High School's building broke out in September of 1908, where I think at this point, every single person that is studying this narrative and getting ready to show it off to the younger generation seriously needs to reconsider. It is no longer factual information at this point. It is very clear and obvious now that we have been told pretend stories about our past when the building needed to be closed for several months for repairs. And of course, yet again, we have no idea how this fire started. We're the New York fire ghost, just going from old world building to old world building, over and over. And nobody ever asked these questions before, I guess. We never asked, who was lighting these buildings on fire? How did the fire start? Where is the fire damage on the building for the ones that are still standing? Who demolished the old building? Which company was this? That all ends now, today. We are asking these questions. There are so many flaws in the narrative that we have all been told. Flushing High School, where? Didn't they tell us that the old one was 4 floors? Maybe 5 floors. But we're of course unsure. They forget these things, of course, from the 1800s, but have a crystal clear memory about things that happened in the 1300s, or even from 4000 BC. When we are told on nyc.gov that the supposed new Flushing High School is also 4 stories, where I'm gonna guess that the one that's here today is the original building. And this story that we were all told about this mysterious, massive old Flushing High School that only had 7 kids attending it and has no construction story and then holds a fire. All of this is, in my opinion, ridiculous. It's incredible. Well, I hope this episode has opened your eyes and shown how repetitive the narrative really is. Every time I see it, I still can't believe that we actually found these clues, basically in real time, while creating these episodes. You have seen, from episode 1 until now, the progression in real time. You have seen the clues unravel, and we are just getting started. This channel has so many more incredible things on the way. I have a lot of ideas that I can't wait to put into action and show you all I think you will all enjoy it and be extremely entertained. And it will, of course, all continue to open the doors for more and more people all over the world, in every single city, to see this information, to see these structures that don't fit into our timeline, to see these coded messages, these keys, and these flaws in all of these narratives. Every day, more and more people are seeing it. And it's a lot of fun being a part of this community, and a lot of fun seeing more and more people finally see the truth and to get their power back and understand that there is something so much more incredible going on here in this place that we all live. And to always remember that once you finally see the truth, once you finally see all the flaws in what we have been told, there is no going back.